In the quiet, peaceful town of Pine Ridge Estates, nestled between towering pines and winding dirt roads, lived a man named Alex. He was in his mid-30s with a calm demeanor and a heart full of kindness. After years of working tirelessly as an environmental scientist in the city, Alex had finally saved enough to buy his dream cabin. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest wooden house surrounded by lush greenery, chirping birds, and the occasional deer wandering through the yard. For Alex, it was perfect. The cabin was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, a place where he could escape the noise and chaos of urban life and reconnect with nature. Every morning, he'd sip his coffee on the porch, listening to the rustling leaves and watching the sun peek over the trees. His dog Max, a golden retriever with boundless energy, would chase squirrels around the yard, barking excitedly at nothing in particular. Life here felt simple, pure, and exactly what Alex needed. But little did Alex know, living in Pine Ridge Estates came with its own set of challenges. The neighborhood was part of a homeowners association, HOA, a group that prided itself on keeping everything neat, tidy, and up to code. And leading this HOA was a woman who took her role very seriously. Let's call her the Watcher, because that's what she did best: watch everyone else's business like it was her personal reality show. The Watcher had lived in Pine Ridge Estates for decades. She knew every rule inside out, and if you dared to break one, even something as small as leaving your trash can out a day early, you'd hear about it. Some people found her intimidating, while others thought she was just plain nosy. Either way, no one wanted to cross her path unless they absolutely had to. When Alex moved in, he didn't think much of the HOA rules. Sure, he saw the packet they handed him during the welcome meeting, but it seemed harmless enough. Things like no loud noises after 9 p.m. or landscaping must be approved beforehand. Nothing too crazy, right? Wrong. Within weeks, Alex realized that living in Pine Ridge meant walking on eggshells. It started with little things. First, there was a letter slipped under his door complaining about Max's barking. Then another note arrived saying his flower bed wasn't HOA approved. Even the color of his curtains apparently violated some obscure guideline. Alex tried not to let it bother him. She probably means well, he told himself. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching him. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Alex decided to invite an old friend over for a visit. This friend had been like a brother to him growing up. They'd lost touch over the years, but when Alex mentioned he'd moved to Pine Ridge, his buddy jumped at the chance to catch up. So they planned a laid-back day: coffee, stories, maybe a walk in the woods nearby. As Alex waited for his friend to arrive, he tidied up the yard a bit. He swept the porch, watered the plants, and made sure Max didn't dig up any new holes. When his friend finally pulled into the driveway, Alex greeted him warmly. They hugged, laughed, and immediately fell back into their old rhythm, chatting about everything from childhood memories to current jobs. They grabbed 2 chairs and sat outside, enjoying the fresh air and each other's company. Max lay at their feet, wagging his tail lazily. Everything seemed perfect until Alex noticed movement across the street. Through the corner of his eye, he spotted the Watcher peeking out from behind her curtains. At first, he shrugged it off. Maybe she was just curious. But then he saw her pick up her phone and start talking animatedly, glancing toward them every few seconds. Alex nudged his friend. Uh-oh, looks like we've got an audience. His friend squinted across the street. You mean the lady spying on us? Yeah, that's her. She runs the HOA here. Be careful what you say. We might end up breaking some secret rule without even realizing it. They both laughed, thinking it was a joke. But unbeknownst to them, the Watcher wasn't just observing. She was dialing 911, convinced she was witnessing something sinister unfold. The afternoon sun was warm, casting long shadows across Alex's yard as he and his friend sat outside, completely unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. Across the street, behind closed curtains, the watcher was busy dialing 911. Her voice trembled with urgency as she whispered into the phone, "There's something suspicious going on at 42 Birch Lane. 2 men acting strange. One of them looks aggressive." She didn't know what exactly made her so certain that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way Alex's friend carried himself calm but alert, like someone who knew how to handle pressure. Or maybe it was the boots he wore, sturdy and practical, the kind you'd see on someone who worked outdoors or in emergencies. To the watcher, though, these details painted a picture far darker than reality. In her mind, Alex wasn't hosting a casual visit. He was conspiring with someone dangerous. Meanwhile, Alex and his friend were oblivious to the chaos they were about to face. They laughed about old times, shared funny stories from work, and reminisced about their childhood adventures. Every now and then, Max would bark at a squirrel darting across the yard, making them both chuckle. It was a perfectly normal day, or so they thought. Suddenly, the sound of tires crunching against gravel broke the peaceful atmosphere. Both men turned toward the driveway where 2 police cruisers had pulled up, their lights flashing silently against the serene backdrop of pine trees. Alex frowned, confused. "What's going on?" he muttered under his breath. His friend raised an eyebrow. "Looks like we're about to find out." 2 officers stepped out of the cars, their expressions serious. One approached Alex while the other hung back, scanning the area cautiously. "Sir," the officer said, addressing Alex, "can you tell us what's happening here?" Alex blinked, caught off guard. Nothing much. Just having coffee with a friend." "Why? Is there a problem?" The officer glanced at Alex's friend, who stood up slowly, holding his hands slightly away from his body to show he wasn't a threat. "We got a call about suspicious activity," the officer explained. "Can I ask who this gentleman is and why you're meeting here?" Alex sighed, realizing what must have happened. He gestured toward his friend. "This is an old buddy of mine. We grew up together. He's visiting for the weekend. That's all. Nothing shady going on here." His friend nodded, adding, "I used to be a firefighter, actually. Now I train paramedics. If anything, I'm the guy you want around in case of trouble." The officers exchanged glances. Something about the situation didn't add up. These 2 men seemed harmless enough, friendly, even. But protocol demanded they investigate further. One of the officers asked for IDs, which both men provided without hesitation. While one officer radioed in to check their information, the other continued asking questions. "So, do either of you know why someone might report you?" The second officer asked. Alex shrugged. "Honestly? Probably because of my neighbor across the street. She's been keeping tabs on me since I moved in. Always complaining about little things, Max barking too much. Flowers that aren't HOA approved. Honestly, I wouldn't put it past her to call you guys over something like this." The officers nodded thoughtfully. By now, dispatch had confirmed that both men were clean, no warrants, no criminal records. In fact, Alex's name popped up in connection with local authorities, but not in the way the watcher had implied. The first officer cleared his throat. "All right, gentlemen, looks like this was just a misunderstanding. Sorry to bother you." As the officers prepared to leave, Alex couldn't resist asking, "Do you happen to know who called this in?" The officer hesitated before answering vaguely. It came through as an anonymous tip, but he trailed off, glancing toward the house across the street. Alex followed his gaze and saw the curtain twitch ever so slightly. He shook his head, not surprised in the least. Once the police cruisers drove away, Alex turned to his friend, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you believe that? She actually called the cops on us for sitting outside drinking coffee," his friend chuckled. "Well, at least it makes for a good story. Still, sounds like you've got quite the character living next door." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, she's something else. I try not to let it get to me, but stuff like this, it's hard not to feel frustrated." For the rest of the afternoon, the mood had shifted slightly. The carefree vibe was replaced with a lingering sense of annoyance. Alex kept glancing across the street, half expecting the watcher to emerge and confront him, but she never did. Instead, she stayed hidden behind her curtains, likely replaying the events in her head, wondering if she'd made a mistake or perhaps doubling down on her belief that she'd done the right thing. Little did Alex know, this incident was only the beginning. Word of the watcher's antics had already started spreading among the neighbors. Some found it amusing, others infuriating. And while Alex tried to brush it off, the tension between him and the watcher was far from resolved. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alex and his friend decided to call it a night. Max curled up on the porch, exhausted from chasing squirrels all day. Inside, Alex poured himself a glass of water, reflecting on the absurdity of the day. He had moved to Pine Ridge Estates for peace and quiet, yet here he was, dealing with drama he hadn't anticipated. But deep down, Alex couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would the watcher escalate her complaints? Or would she finally realize she had gone too far? Only time would tell. The next morning, Pine Ridge Estates was buzzing with gossip. News of the watcher's 911 call had spread faster than wildfire, thanks to a few nosy neighbors who had seen the police cars parked outside Alex's cabin. By breakfast time, everyone seemed to have their own version of the story. Some claimed Alex's visitor looked like a career criminal, while others joked that the watcher probably thought Max, Alex's golden retriever, was part of some secret operation. Alex woke up to find a text from one of his neighbors saying, "Hey, I heard what happened yesterday. That's wild. Let me know if you need backup against HOA drama." Another neighbor stopped by later in the day, bringing over a plate of cookies and joking, "Guess we should all start carrying ID cards when we visit your place." Despite the humor, Alex couldn't shake off the frustration simmering beneath the surface. He understood that the watcher might have been trying to protect the neighborhood, or at least convince herself she was, but her actions felt invasive and unnecessary. Calling the police on two people enjoying a casual afternoon? It was hard not to take it personally. Meanwhile, across the street, the watcher was dealing with her own whirlwind of emotions. At first, she tried to justify her decision. "I was just doing my duty," she muttered to herself as she watered her prize-winning roses. "How was I supposed to know they weren't up to something?" But doubt began creeping in when she noticed the looks she got from other neighbors. A few avoided eye contact altogether, while others exchanged knowing glances whenever she walked past. Even her closest ally on the HOA board gave her a lukewarm smile during their weekly meeting. Even her closest ally on the HOA board gave her a lukewarm smile during their weekly meeting. Even her Hokin smile during their weekly meeting. Clear sign that things were shifting. Word eventually reached the watcher about how the police had handled the situation. Apparently, not only had Alex and his friend been cleared of any wrongdoing, but Alex's background check revealed something unexpected. He wasn't just an ordinary homeowner. Far from it. According to local law enforcement records, Alex was a well-respected environmental scientist who often volunteered his expertise for search and rescue missions in the nearby forests. He had even received awards for his conservation efforts and worked closely with the fire department during emergencies. In short, he was exactly the kind of person you'd want living in your community, not someone to accuse of shady behavior. The watcher heard this, her face flushed red with embarrassment. She paced back and forth in her living room, replaying the events in her head. Had she misjudged him? Or worse, had she ruined her reputation in the neighborhood? Determined to salvage whatever dignity she had left, the watcher decided to take matters into her own hands. The following day, she marched straight to the HOA office, demanding access to Alex's file. "If I'm going to enforce the rules properly," she announced to the board president, "then I need all the facts." The board president raised an eyebrow but handed over the folder without argument. After all, the watcher rarely admitted she might be wrong about anything. It was almost entertaining to watch her squirm. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened in disbelief. There it was, written in black and white, Alex's achievements, accolades, and glowing recommendations from local authorities. One document even included a heartfelt thank you note from the sheriff's department for his invaluable assistance during a particularly challenging forest fire last year. For once, the watcher was speechless. She sank into a chair, clutching the folder tightly, her mind racing. How could she have gotten it so wrong? All those complaints she'd filed about Alex's dog barking too loudly, his flowers being out of code, suddenly felt petty and ridiculous. Worse still, she realized she hadn't given him a fair chance. Instead of getting to know him or understanding why he chose to live in Pine Ridge, she had jumped to conclusions based on nothing more than suspicion and fear. Back at home, the watcher stared out her window, watching Alex tend to his garden. He moved with ease, chatting with another neighbor who had stopped by to say hello. For the first time, she noticed how genuinely friendly he was, how much care he put into maintaining his property. She also saw Max wagging his tail enthusiastically, clearly thrilled to be showered with attention by anyone passing by. It dawned on her then. Maybe the problem wasn't Alex at all. Maybe it was her. That night, the watcher lay awake, wrestling with guilt. She knew she couldn't undo what she had done, but perhaps she could make amends. It wouldn't be easy. Apologizing wasn't exactly her strong suit, but staying silent felt worse. If she didn't act, she risked losing the respect of her neighbors forever. And deep down, she knew she cared about that more than she cared to admit. The next morning, after hours of tossing and turning, the watcher made a decision. She would confront Alex directly, not to argue or defend herself, but to apologize. Gathering every ounce of courage she had, she walked across the street, her heart pounding with each step. When she reached Alex's porch, she hesitated for a moment before knocking softly on the door. Alex opened it, looking surprised to see her standing there. "Hi," he said cautiously, unsure of what to expect. "Hi," the watcher replied, fumbling with her words. "Look, I owe you an apology. What happened the other day? I acted rashly. I judged you unfairly, and I'm sorry." Alex blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't expected this. After a brief pause, he nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." Encouraged by his response, the watcher continued, "I read your file. I had no idea how much you've done for this community. Honestly, I feel terrible about everything." Alex smiled faintly. "Apology accepted. Why don't you join us for coffee sometime? Maybe we can clear the air." The watcher managed a small smile in return. "I'd like that." As she walked back home, a weight lifted off her shoulders. She knew repairing her relationship with Alex and the rest of the neighborhood wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Pine Ridge Estates wasn't just a place to enforce rules. It was a place to build connections too. The watcher's apology may have been a step in the right direction, but it didn't magically erase the tension that had built up over months of her relentless complaints and accusations. Word of her dramatic 911 call and Alex's impressive background had spread like wildfire through Pine Ridge Estates, turning the neighborhood into a hotbed of whispered conversations and shared memes. For once, the watcher found herself on the receiving end of the scrutiny she had so often dished out to others. It started innocently enough. A neighbor joked during a book club meeting, "Well, I guess we can all sleep better knowing Alex is basically a superhero." Everyone laughed, but the watcher sat stiffly in her chair, forcing a tight smile. Another neighbor quipped, "Maybe next time we should just send Alex instead of calling 911. The comment earned a round of chuckles, though no one dared look directly at the watcher. She felt the weight of their stares even when they weren't looking. But things escalated quickly after someone created a private Facebook group called Susan Watch, though everyone knew who Susan really was. The page became an instant hit among residents, filled with playful jabs about the watcher's infamous antics. One post featured a cartoon of her peering through binoculars, with the caption, "When you think your neighbors are planning world domination." Another showed a photo of Max, Alex's golden retriever, with the text, "Pine Ridge's most dangerous criminal." At first, the watcher tried to ignore it all. She deleted the Facebook app from her phone and avoided social gatherings, hoping the storm would blow over. But the jokes kept coming, subtle yet pointed, and soon she couldn't escape them. Even her mailbox wasn't safe one morning. She found a sticky note attached to it that read, "Next time, maybe check the file before dialing 911. It wasn't mean-spirited, exactly, but it stung nonetheless. Her frustration reached its peak during the monthly HOA meeting. As usual, the watcher arrived early, armed with a clipboard and a list of grievances. She planned to address several issues, including what she perceived as Alex's excessive noise late at night. But this time, the room felt different. Instead of nodding along as she spoke, the other board members exchanged skeptical glances. When she brought up Alex, one member interrupted her mid-sentence. "Before we discuss this," he said, clearing his throat, "have you actually met Alex? Or reviewed his contributions to the community?" The watcher froze, clutching her pen tightly. I don't need to meet him to enforce the rules," she sputtered. "That's not the point." Another board member chimed in gently, "Maybe it's worth getting to know him better. He's done some incredible work around here, you know. And frankly, people are starting to wonder if your complaints are, well, justified." The watcher's face burned red. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. Deep down, she knew they were right. Her obsession with enforcing every little rule had blinded her to the bigger picture, the people behind the properties. She slumped back in her chair, defeated, as the rest of the meeting moved on. Without her input, that night, unable to sleep, the watcher sat alone in her dimly lit living room, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the day's events in her head, cringing at how foolish she must have seemed. For years, she had prided herself on being the guardian of Pine Ridge Estates, the person who kept everything running smoothly. Now she realized she might have caused more harm than good. The thought gnawed at her, keeping her awake long into the night. By morning, she had made up her mind. She couldn't undo the past, but she could try to change the future. The first thing she did was cancel her weekly inspection rounds, a ritual she had religiously followed for years. No more prowling the streets with a notebook, jotting down infractions like some self-appointed hall monitor. Instead, she decided to focus on repairing relationships. Starting with Alex, she baked cookies, not because she particularly enjoyed baking, but because it felt like the kind of gesture neighbors appreciated. After letting them cool, she carefully arranged them on a plate and walked across the street, heart pounding with nervousness. This time, Alex greeted her warmly, inviting her inside. They sat at his kitchen table, chatting awkwardly at first but gradually finding common ground. She learned that Alex had chosen Pine Ridge Estates not just for its beauty, but because he hoped to inspire others to care for the environment. In turn, she confessed her fears about losing control of the neighborhood she loved so dearly. Conversation marked the beginning of a fragile truce. Over the following weeks, the Watcher made a conscious effort to ease up on her strict enforcement of HOA rules. She stopped filing frivolous complaints and even attended a local charity event organized by Alex, where residents came together to plant trees along the main road. At first, her presence raised eyebrows, but as she rolled up her sleeves and joined in, people began to soften toward her. Slowly but surely, the Watcher's reputation began to shift. Neighbors still teased her occasionally, but the tone changed. It became lighter, friendlier. One resident joked, "Hey, Susan's not so bad after all. Who knew she could bake such great cookies?" Another added, "Maybe we should elect her president of the gardening club." Even the Facebook group Susan watched took a humorous turn, with posts celebrating her newfound willingness to let loose. One meme showed a picture of her planting a tree with the caption, "From rule enforcer to tree hugger, who saw this coming?" Despite these positive changes, the Watcher knew she still had a long way to go. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, and there were moments when old habits crept back in. During a block party, she caught herself eyeing a neighbor's slightly overgrown lawn and instinctively reached for her phone to snap a photo. But then she paused, took a deep breath, and put the phone away. Progress, she reminded herself, was messy. As for Alex, he welcomed the Watcher's attempts to reconnect, though he remained cautious. He appreciated her efforts to make amends, but he also understood that real change required consistency. Still, he couldn't deny that something had shifted between them. Their interactions, once tense and adversarial, now carried a hint of mutual respect. One evening, as they stood side by side at a community bonfire, Alex turned to her with a grin. "You know," he said, "you're not half as scary as I thought you were." The Watcher laughed nervously, shaking her head. "And you're not half as suspicious as I made you out to be." They shared a laugh, surrounded by the warmth of crackling flames and friendly chatter. For the first time in a long while, the Watcher felt like she belonged, not as the enforcer of rules, but as a part of the community she had sworn to protect. And though challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them not with judgment, but with understanding. Months had passed since the Watcher's dramatic apology and her gradual transformation from neighborhood enforcer to reluctant team player. Life in Pine Ridge Estates settled into a new rhythm, one that felt lighter and less tense than before. The air of suspicion that once hung over Alex's cabin had lifted, replaced by a sense of quiet acceptance. For the first time in years, the community seemed to breathe easier. The Watcher wasn't fully forgiven, not yet, but she was making progress. She still attended HOA meetings, though now her clipboard carried fewer complaints and more suggestions for improving the neighborhood. Instead of nitpicking about flower colors or mailbox heights, she proposed ideas like organizing weekend cleanup drives or hosting workshops on sustainable gardening. Some residents were skeptical at first, whispering behind her back about whether this was just another phase. But when she showed up early to help set up for events and stayed late to clean up afterward, people began to see her efforts as genuine. Alex noticed the change too. He'd always thought of the Watcher as someone who thrived on control, but he started to realize there was more to her than met the eye. Beneath her stern exterior lay a deep love for Pine Ridge Estates, a desire to preserve its charm and keep it safe. It wasn't so different from his own reasons for moving there, really. They weren't enemies. They were two sides of the same coin, both wanting the best for their shared home. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alex found himself sitting on his porch, with Max curled up at his feet, watching the leaves drift lazily to the ground. The watcher appeared at the edge of his yard, holding a basket filled with freshly picked apples. "Thought you might want these," she said, offering him the basket. With a hesitant smile, "They're from my tree. I know how much you like baking pies." Alex raised an eyebrow, amused. "You remembered that?" She shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "I listen sometimes. Besides, your pie at the block party last month. Best thing I've tasted in ages." He laughed, taking the basket from her. "Thanks. You'll have to come over sometime. I'll make sure you get the first slice." Her face lit up, though she tried to play it cool. "Don't think this means I'm going soft on the rules," she teased, pointing a finger at him. "Your gutters still need cleaning." "Fair enough," Alex replied with a grin. "But maybe next time, instead of writing me a note, you could just knock on my door and ask." The watcher hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." As she walked back across the street, Alex couldn't help but feel a pang of satisfaction. Things weren't perfect, far from it, but they were better. And sometimes, better was all you could hope for. A new chapter. With winter approaching, the neighborhood came together for its annual holiday celebration. Strings of twinkling lights adorned porches, and garlands wrapped around lampposts gave the streets a festive glow. This year, the watcher volunteered to lead the decorating committee, surprising everyone, including herself. At first, some neighbors worried she'd turn the event into a rigid, rule-bound affair, but she surprised them again by letting creativity take center stage. She encouraged families to decorate however they liked, resulting in a kaleidoscope of styles that reflected the unique personalities of Pine Ridge Estates. On the night of the celebration, the community gathered in the park for hot cocoa, caroling, and a visit from Santa Claus. Alex brought a batch of his famous apple pies, which quickly disappeared as soon as they hit the dessert table. The watcher, bundled in a thick scarf and gloves, handed out mugs of cocoa to anyone who needed warming up. When a group of kids started building a snowman near the gazebo, she joined in, laughing as they argued over whether it should wear a hat or a scarf. It was during moments like these that Alex realized how far the watcher had come. Gone was the woman who once patrolled the streets with a clipboard, ready to pounce on the slightest infraction. In her place stood someone who genuinely cared about the people around her, not just the rules they followed. Sure, she still had her quirks. During the caroling session, she insisted on leading jingle bells with military precision, earning groans of playful protest from the crowd. But even that felt endearing now, like a quirk you'd expect from any beloved neighbor. Later that evening, as the festivities wound down and the crowd began to disperse, Alex found himself standing beside the watcher near the glowing bonfire. They watched as families packed up blankets and children chased each other through the snow, their laughter echoing in the cold night air. "You know," Alex said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "this is probably the happiest I've seen the neighborhood in a long time." The watcher glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Me too. Funny how things work out, isn't it? I spent so much time trying to control everything. And now I see that maybe letting go a little isn't such a bad thing." Alex nodded. "Sometimes we learn the hard way. But hey, no one's keeping score here. What matters is where we go from here." She smiled faintly, her breath visible in the frosty air. "Thanks for not holding a grudge, by the way. I know I didn't exactly give you a warm welcome when you moved in." "No hard feelings," Alex assured her. "Besides, you've been working hard to make up for it. People notice that." The watcher looked away, seemingly touched by his words. After a moment, she cleared her throat and gestured toward the remaining snacks on the nearby table. "Well, if you'll excuse me, I think there's one last piece of pie calling my name." Alex chuckled. "Go ahead. Just don't eat it all. You promised me the first slice, remember?" As she walked off, Alex lingered by the fire, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Pine Ridge Estates wasn't perfect, and neither were its residents. But that was okay. Imperfections made life interesting, messy, and real. And as the flames crackled and danced in front of him, Alex knew he wouldn't trade this place or these people for anything. Across the street, the watcher sat on a bench, savoring the last bite of pie. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. She had fought hard to maintain order in her world, only to discover that true harmony came not from rules, but from connection. As she gazed at the flickering lights and happy faces around her, she whispered to herself, almost in awe, "Maybe this is what it means to belong." And with that, Pine Ridge Estates entered a new chapter 1 built on understanding, forgiveness, and the simple joy of being part of something bigger than yourself.